A horse crashes the most anticipated wedding of the year, but what seemed like a wild incident reveals a secret kept for over a decade, and nothing will ever be the same. The morning in St. Victoria Springs had begun with an unusual radiance. The sun rose lazily over the verdant hills, bathing the Hayes family mansion with golden light that seemed to bless this special day. From the heights of the veranda, floral, arrangements of lilies and white roses trembled in the gentle breeze, perfuming the air with a delicate fragrance that promised memorable moments. Olivia Hayes awoke even before the first ray of sunlight touched her window. At 25, she had grown accustomed to the morning routine that had calmed her since adolescence, opening the silk curtains and looking out at the field where Max, her beloved horse, usually grazed peacefully. It was a silent ritual, a way to start the day knowing that everything was in its rightful place. But this morning something was different. The field was empty, completely empty. "Max," she whispered to herself, furrowing her brow. In 15 years together, she had never seen the field without the imposing presence of the black horse. Max was as punctual as a clock, always there like a silent guardian of her dreams. Olivia ran to the veranda, still wearing her white silk nightgown, and swept the horizon with her eyes. Nothing. Just the green grass swaying in the wind and the emptiness where her most faithful companion should have been. "Mrs. Cecilia," she called, her voice higher pitched than normal. The housekeeper appeared in the hallway, already impeccably dressed despite the early hour, carrying a tray with chamomile tea. "Good morning, my dear. How are you feeling on the most important day of your life? Where's Max?" Olivia ignored the question, fixing her anxious eyes on the woman who had cared for her since childhood. Mrs. Cecilia hesitated for a moment, nervously adjusting the tray in her hands. "Ah, the horse. Your Uncle Alan said he's at the new stable. You're on the other side of the property. You know how animals get agitated when there's a lot of movement around here." The explanation sounded forced, but Olivia had no time to question it. At that moment, Marina Graham, the wedding planner, burst into the room like a hurricane of efficiency. "Olivia, darling, we need to start preparations now. The hairdresser has arrived, the makeup artist is coming up the stairs, and we have exactly 4 hours to transform you into the most beautiful bride St. Victoria Springs has ever seen." Marina was a 40-year-old woman, elegant and determined, who had organized the most important weddings in the region. Her reputation was impeccable, but Olivia had always perceived something calculating in her perfect smiles. "Marina, did you see Max this morning?" asked Olivia, still disturbed by the animal's absence. "Max? The horse?" Marina laughed, a crystalline and artificial sound. "Darling, on your wedding day, you should be thinking about Caleb, not horses. By the way, he called a little while ago. He's anxious to see you at the altar." Olivia forced a smile. Caleb Anderson was everything a woman could desire: handsome, successful, attentive. Heir to one of the largest construction companies in the state, he had courted her for 2 years, with the patience of a gentleman. Her parents, Richard and Helen, would have approved of the union. At least that's what her Uncle Alan always said. "Mrs. Cecilia," Olivia called softly when Marina left to check the floral arrangements. "Are you sure Max is okay?" The housekeeper approached, placing her calloused hand on the young woman's face. "My child, you're nervous. It's natural. But trust me, everything is under control." There was something in Mrs. Cecilia's tone that wasn't completely convincing, but Olivia decided to set aside her concern. After all, it was her wedding day. The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of preparations. The hairdresser created an elaborate hairstyle with braids and pearls. The makeup artist enhanced her green eyes with golden shadows, and Marina supervised. Every detail with the precision of a general. When Olivia finally looked at herself in the Venetian mirror that had belonged to her mother, she barely recognized herself. The French lace dress embraced her curves perfectly, the 3-meter-long veil created an ethereal aura, and the diamond tiara, a family heirloom, crowned the entire ensemble. "You look stunning," murmured Mrs. Cecilia, her eyes watery. "Mom would be proud." Olivia delicately touched the tiara, remembering how Helen used to tell stories about the women in the family who had worn it before her. "Yes, she would, my dear." very proud. Outside, the activity had intensified. Cars were arriving, guests were heading to St. Mary's Church, and photographers were already discreetly taking their positions. The wedding of Olivia Hayes to Caleb Anderson was being called the Union of the Year by the local press. With an hour left before the ceremony, Olivia allowed herself a moment of solitude. She sat in the velvet armchair by the window and again observed the empty field. Max's absence still bothered her, like an out-of-tune note in a perfect symphony. It was then that she noticed something strange. A small, black feather caught on the windowsill, fluttering in the wind. It was identical to the feathers in Max's mane. How had it gotten there, and why did she feel it wasn't just a coincidence? Olivia delicately picked up the feather, examining it against the light. There was something almost magical about it, as if it carried a silent message. She tucked it between the pages of her bouquet without knowing exactly why. "Olivia, it's time!" shouted Marina from downstairs. Taking a deep breath, Olivia stood up. Her destiny awaited her at St. Mary's Church, but as she descended the mansion's majestic staircase, the black feather among the flowers seemed to pulse with a life of its own, and the emptiness in the field where Max should have been continued to echo in her heart like a premonition she still couldn't decipher. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you're watching from and we'll continue. St. Mary's Church in St. Victoria Springs had never received such an elaborate decoration. Thousands of white roses formed cascades along the century-old arches. Aromatic candles created a fairy tale ambiance, and the stained glass windows projected multicolored lights onto the noble wooden pews. 200 guests waited in respectful silence, dressed in their finest clothes to witness the union that would join two of the region's most influential families. Caleb Anderson adjusted his tie knot for the fourth time, trying to disguise the nervousness consuming him. At 30, he was considered one of the state's most coveted bachelors. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a captivating smile, he had built a solid reputation in the construction industry. But at that moment, standing beside the altar, something seemed out of place. "Calm down, brother," whispered Ryan Anderson, approaching discreetly. "You're sweating more than a laborer under the midday sun." Ryan was 2 years younger than Caleb, but had always been the more observant of the two. With a law degree, he worked as a legal consultant for the family construction company, but lately had noticed some irregularities that left him uneasy. "It's not ordinary nervousness," Caleb admitted, wiping his palms on his handkerchief. "It's just that sometimes I feel like I'm getting into something bigger than I imagined." "What do you mean?" Ryan frowned. Before Caleb could respond, Dr. Alan Hayes approached, impeccable in his charcoal grey suit. At 55, Olivia's uncle was an imposing man, with grey hair combed back and a penetrating gaze. Since assuming guardianship of his niece after the tragic accident that claimed Richard and Helen, he had become a respected and feared figure in the town. "Caleb, my boy, how are you feeling?" he asked, placing his hand on the young man's shoulder, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Fine, Dr. Hayes. Anxious to receive Olivia as my wife. I'm sure you'll be very happy, and you can count on me for anything you need, especially in business." Ryan observed the exchange of glances between his brother and Olivia's uncle. There was something there he couldn't decipher, a subtle tension that hung in the air like invisible smoke. On the opposite side of the church, an elegant woman of approximately 50 discreetly occupied a seat in the last row. Claire Nelson wore a sober black dress and a hat that partially covered her face, but her brown eyes observed every movement with surgical attention. As the former accountant of the Hayes family, she knew secrets that could completely change the course of the ceremony. "Father Augustus," Dr. Hayes addressed the priest, "can we begin? Olivia shouldn't be long." The priest, a kind 60-year-old man who had known the family for decades, nodded, but something in his eyes revealed a concern beyond clerical responsibility. He too had noticed strange movements in recent months, conversations interrupted when he entered the parish office, documents being hastily put away when he visited the Hayes office. "Of course, Dr. Hayes, but where is our bride?" As if she had been summoned, Marina Graham appeared at the church entrance, gesturing for the musicians to begin the wedding march. Her expression was one of pure professional satisfaction, but there was something in her movements that seemed excessively controlled. "She's coming," she announced, adjusting the priest's microphone. "5 minutes and we'll have the bride's entrance." Ryan took the opportunity to approach Caleb again. "Brother, I need to talk to you after the ceremony. It's important." "About what?" "Some contracts I found in the office. Strange. Things are happening." Caleb felt a shiver run down his spine. In recent months, his relationship with Dr. Hayes had intensified surprisingly. The man treated him almost like a son, offering advantageous business partnerships and including him in important decisions regarding the Hayes family business. But some of these proposals seemed questionable. "Ryan, today is not the day for this," murmured Caleb. "That's precisely why we need to talk. I found documents that—" "Silence," ordered Dr. Hayes, approaching stealthily. "The bride is coming." The church doors opened majestically, and Olivia appeared like a celestial vision. Her French lace dress sparkled under the light from the stained glass windows. Her veil floated delicately, and the diamond tiara captured every ray of sunlight that penetrated the temple. The guests rose in unison, a murmur of admiration echoing off the century-old walls. But as she walked down the aisle covered with rose petals, Olivia couldn't stop thinking about the black feather hidden in her bouquet and the empty field where Max should have been. Her eyes met Caleb's at the altar, and she forced a smile that didn't fully reflect the joy she should have been feeling. Halfway down the aisle, something caught her attention. Claire Nelson, the woman in the hat, had discreetly risen and was walking toward the church's side exit. But before leaving, she turned and made direct eye contact with Olivia. Her lips moved silently, forming a single word that made the bride's heart race. "Careful." Olivia stumbled slightly, supported by Mrs. Cecilia, who accompanied her. The housekeeper whispered affectionately, "Calm down, my dear. Take a deep breath." But Olivia could no longer breathe properly. The temple seemed to be getting smaller, the faces of the guests transformed into a colorful blur, and a strange sensation that she was about to make an irreversible mistake completely dominated her. When she finally reached the altar, Caleb extended his hand to receive her. His fingers were cold and trembled imperceptibly. "You look beautiful," he whispered, but his voice sounded distant, as if speaking through an echo. Father Augustus opened the prayer book and began the ceremony. But his words seemed to float in the air without finding their destination, while Olivia felt that the whole situation was unreal, as if she were watching someone else's life. It was then that a completely unexpected sound echoed from outside the church, growing in intensity until it became impossible to ignore. A powerful and familiar neigh that made Olivia's heart stop beating for a full moment. The neigh echoed through the walls of St. Mary's Church like an ancestral war cry. Initially, some guests smiled nervously, imagining it was some stray animal nearby. But the sound repeated, louder and more insistent, carrying an urgency that made all those present glance at each other with growing unease. Olivia felt her heart racing. It was Max. She knew that unmistakable voice better than any melody. But what was her horse doing there, and why did he sound so desperate? "Let's continue with the ceremony," murmured Dr. Hayes to the priest, a note of irritation escaping his controlled voice. Father Augustus hesitated, observing the transformed expression on Olivia's face. The young woman had turned completely pale, and her hands trembled as she held the bouquet. "Olivia, my child, is everything all right?" asked the priest with genuine concern. Before she could answer, the heavy wooden doors of the church opened, with a crash that made all 200 guests turn simultaneously. And there, majestic and imposing, stood Max. The black horse entered the central nave as if he owned the place. His coat shone like polished obsidian, his mane dramatically flowing in the wind that entered through the open door, and his dark eyes were fixed exclusively on Olivia. There was no saddle or bridle. He was completely free. "My God!" cried one of the guests, rising in alarm. Chaos instantly ensued. People began to stand, some rushing to the side exits, others climbing onto pews to protect themselves. Marina Graham frantically gestured to the security guards who had been hired for the event, but they seemed paralyzed in the face of the unusual situation. "Catch that animal," ordered Dr. Hayes, his mask of composure finally falling away. But Max completely ignored the tumult around him. He walked with determination down the central aisle, his hooves echoing rhythmically against the marble floor, knocking down floral arrangements and scattering petals wherever he went. His destination was clear: Olivia. "Max," she whispered, tears beginning to form in her eyes. Caleb tried to position himself between Olivia and the approaching animal, but something in Max's gaze made him instinctively back away. There was an intelligence there, a determination that went beyond normal horse behavior. "Olivia, get back!" shouted Mrs. Cecilia, running toward the altar. But Olivia didn't move. For some reason she couldn't explain, she felt completely safe. Max stopped directly in front of her, majestically lowered his head and touched his muzzle to the bouquet of flowers she was holding. It was then that something extraordinary happened. Ryan Anderson, who had remained motionless observing the entire scene, took advantage of the confusion to open the envelope he had been carrying for hours. His fingers trembled as he removed documents he had discovered in the family construction company's office the night before. Contracts, bank transfers, property records, all pointing to an elaborate scheme that involved his own brother. "Caleb!" shouted Ryan, crossing through the tumult. "You need to see this." But Caleb couldn't take his eyes off Olivia and Max. There was something almost mystical about the connection between the woman and the animal, as if they shared a secret language he could never understand. Max raised his head and, delicately, took one of the roses from Olivia's bouquet with his teeth. When she looked at where the flower had been removed, she discovered something that made her stagger: a small flash drive, skillfully hidden among the petals by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. How did this? She began to ask, but her voice was drowned out by a new sound. Claire Nelson had returned to the church and was now climbing the steps to the altar, carrying a folder of documents. Her posture was firm and decided, her eyes shining with the determination of someone who had finally decided to reveal the truth. "Dr. Alan Hayes," she said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade, "I think it's time to explain to your niece what really happened to her parents' inheritance." The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Hayes turned livid, Marina stopped gesturing, and even the guests who were still in the church fell completely silent. "Claire," murmured Dr. Hayes, a mixture of surprise and terror in his voice, "what are you doing here?" "Fulfilling a promise I made to Helen and Richard before they departed," replied Claire, opening the folder. "A promise to protect Olivia from the truth until she was ready to hear it. And that day has come." Olivia looked from Claire to her uncle, then to Caleb, who had completely paled. The flash drive in her hand seemed to burn, and Max remained at her side like an ancestral guardian, protecting her from dangers she didn't yet fully comprehend. "What truth?" she asked, her voice emerging as a whisper. Claire took a deep breath, looking directly into the young woman's eyes. "Olivia, dear, your uncle is not who you think he is, and this wedding—" She looked at Caleb with an expression that mixed pity and disappointment. "This wedding is not a union of love. It's the final piece of a plan that began the day your parents departed this life." Olivia's world began to crumble, her legs weakened, but Max immediately positioned himself at her side, offering support. It was as if the animal knew exactly what was happening and was there to ensure she didn't fall. And as Claire began to reveal documents that would change everything forever, Olivia finally understood why Max had disappeared that morning and why he had returned in such a dramatic fashion. He wasn't just her pet horse, he was her protector, trained and prepared by her own parents for a moment like this. St. Mary's Church had transformed into an improvised courtroom. Of the original 200 guests, only about 50 remained, divided between morbid curiosity and genuine loyalty to the Hayes family. The rest had fled the tumult, preferring to comment on the events from the safety of their homes. Claire Nelson positioned herself in the center of the altar, her folder of documents open like a weapon of truth. At 50, she carried the dignified posture of someone who had dedicated decades to the service of a family she deeply respected, but also the iron determination of someone who would not allow her employer's memory to be dishonored. "Olivia," Claire began, her voice echoing through the nave, "your parents were extraordinary people, but they were also cautious. In the months before they departed, Richard and Helen discovered serious irregularities in the family business." Dr. Hayes tried to approach, but Max blocked his path, strategically positioning himself between him and the women. The horse seemed to perfectly understand the dynamics of the situation. "Claire, you don't know what you're doing," murmured Dr. Hayes, cold sweat running down his forehead. "You're destroying this family." "No, Alan, you're the one destroying this family. For 5 years now." Olivia held the flash drive with trembling hands, still trying to process the magnitude of what she was discovering. Caleb remained motionless beside her, torn between loyalty to the man who had become his mentor and the growing realization that he had been used as a pawn in a much larger game. "Ryan," Claire addressed the young lawyer, "you found the contracts, didn't you?" Ryan nodded gravely, holding up the papers he had brought. "Contracts transferring the Hayes family's rural properties to shell companies, all controlled by Dr. Hayes through figureheads," he said, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "And a detailed schedule to assume total control of the Hayes empire by December of this year. Through marriage," completed Claire, looking directly at Caleb. "Did you know about this, young man?" Caleb shook his head, genuinely shocked. Dr. Hayes approached me 2 years ago. He said Olivia needed someone who would take care of her, who understood business. He offered partnerships, included me in important decisions. I thought it was because he considered me suitable for her." "And you were suitable," intervened Olivia, her voice coming out stronger than expected. "But not for the reasons you imagined." Mrs. Cecilia, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke up. "My child, I knew this day would come. Your parents made me promise to take care of you, but also not to interfere until the truth naturally came to light." "You knew?" Olivia turned to the housekeeper, a mixture of betrayal and understanding in her eyes. "I knew your uncle wasn't trustworthy. I knew Max had been specially trained by your father for situations like this, and I knew Claire kept documents that would one day be necessary." Max neighed softly, as if confirming the housekeeper's words. Olivia caressed his neck, finally understanding why she had always felt so connected to the animal. "Dad trained Max to protect me?" she asked. "Your father was a visionary," explained Claire. "He realized that Alan had ambitions beyond the temporary administration of the business, so he took precautions. Max was trained by one of the best trainers in the country, not just to obey commands, but to recognize dangerous situations and act independently." Dr. Hayes finally exploded. "Enough! You're inventing a ridiculous conspiracy. Richard was my brother. I would never harm the family." "A brother you always envied," retorted Claire, removing more documents from the folder. "A brother whose success you could never match. And when the opportunity appeared, you didn't hesitate to take advantage." She showed a series of photographs and documents that made Dr. Hayes pale even more. "These are copies of your secret meetings with international buyers interested in the Hayes family lands. Meetings that happened just 3 months after Richard and Helen's departure." Olivia felt as if she had been living in a parallel reality for the past 5 years. Everything she had considered true was being questioned, rewritten, redefined. "The flash drive," she raised the small device. "What's on it?" "Your parents' last message," Claire answered softly. "They recorded a video a few days before they left, explaining their suspicions and leaving specific instructions for you." Marina Graham, who had remained strangely silent during the entire revelation, finally spoke up. "Dr. Hayes, I think we should stop here. This situation has completely spiraled out of control." Everyone turned to her, surprised by the intimacy of her tone when addressing Olivia's uncle. "Marina?" Olivia frowned. "Are you involved in this?" The event planner sighed deeply, finally abandoning her mask of neutral professionalism. "Olivia, I'm sorry, but yes, I was part of the plan. My role was to ensure you married Caleb, creating the perfect legal situation for the definitive transfer of assets." Caleb backed away as if he'd been punched in the stomach. "Marina, you told me Olivia was in love with me. that I would be perfect for her. Was it all a lie? Not everything. Marina looked at Olivia with what seemed like genuine remorse. You really did fall in love with him, and he with you. That wasn't in the plan. It should have been just a convenient marriage, but you complicated everything by developing real feelings. Olivia looked at Caleb, seeing in him the same confusion and pain she felt. Both had been manipulated, but in different ways. She had been deceived about her uncle's character and the nature of her relationship, while he had been used as an unwitting tool in a conspiracy. Max moved even closer to Olivia, gently pressing his muzzle against her hand. It was as if he were saying that, regardless of all the lies that had been revealed, she still had something real and true by her side. I want to hear my parents' message, declared Olivia, her voice gaining a strength she didn't know she possessed. Now, if this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you're watching from and we'll continue. The silence in St. Mary's Church was so dense it seemed to have its own substance. Olivia held the flash drive as if it were a sacred talisman, knowing she was about to hear her parents' voices for the first time in 5 years. Claire approached delicately, removing a laptop from the folder she carried. They asked me to keep this until you were ready, explained Claire, turning on the equipment. And they said you would recognize the right moment. Dr. Hayes tried once more to approach, but Max positioned himself firmly in his path, nostrils flared and eyes fixed on the man he now recognized as a threat. Olivia, don't do this, implored her uncle, his voice laden with desperation. You'll destroy our family because of fantasies and conspiracies. Our family was already destroyed 5 years ago, replied Olivia, inserting the flash drive into the computer. By you. The screen illuminated, and after a few seconds of loading, 2 familiar and beloved faces appeared. Richard Hayes, with his dark hair and gentle smile, was seated beside Helen, whose green eyes were identical to her daughter's. They appeared to be in the farm office, with Max visible in the background, grazing peacefully. My dear Olivia, Helen's voice echoed, through the church, instantly bringing tears to the young woman's eyes. If you're watching this video, it means our suspicions were confirmed, and your Uncle Alan tried to take control of the family assets. Richard's voice followed, serious but affectionate. Daughter, we discovered evidence that my brother has been diverting resources from the company for years. Falsified documents, offshore accounts, partnerships with shell companies. He's planning to take complete control of everything we've built. Olivia sobbed, covering her mouth with her hand. Caleb instinctively moved closer to console her, but hesitated, not knowing if he still had the right to touch her. Helen continued in the video. We know this is very difficult to accept, my love. Alan is your uncle, and you grew up trusting him. But we cannot allow him to destroy everything we've worked for our entire lives. That's why we took some precautions, added Richard. Max was specially trained to recognize dangerous situations and protect you. Claire has copies of all important documents kept in a safe place, and Mrs. Cecilia was instructed on how to act when the moment of truth arrived. Dr. Hayes collapsed onto one of the church pews, finally understanding that his charade had come to an end. They never forgave me, he murmured to himself. They never saw me as an equal. In the video, Helen addressed the camera directly, as if she could see through time and space. Olivia, darling, your real inheritance isn't just the business or properties. It's the project we were developing in secret, an equine rehabilitation center for children with special needs. We wanted you to know about this when you were mature enough to continue the dream. Richard pointed to something off-screen. In the old stable behind the barn, there's a hidden safe. The combination is in your mother's diary on the date of your 10th birthday. There you'll find detailed plans for the center, resources reserved for the project, and more evidence of your uncle's embezzlement. And always remember, Helen concluded, her eyes shining with maternal love, no matter what happens, you're not alone. Max will take care of you. The people who truly matter will support you, and our memory will live on in every brave decision you make. The video ended with an image of the three together, Richard, Helen, and Max, like a complete and loving family. Olivia was crying copiously, but there was something different about her tears now. It wasn't just sadness. It was relief, understanding, and most importantly, determination. Ryan approached, extending the documents he had discovered. "Olivia, I have enough evidence here to reverse all the transfers your uncle made illegally. The assets can be fully recovered." Father Augustus, who had followed the entire revelation in respectful silence, finally spoke. "My child, your parents were very special people. They came to me several times to discuss the rehabilitation center. It was a beautiful dream." Caleb hesitantly approached Olivia. "Olivia, I didn't know any of this. I need you to believe me. My feelings for you were always genuine." She looked at him through her tears, seeing in him the same confusion and pain she felt. "I know, Caleb. You were also a victim in this situation." Marina approached, removing the elaborate veil from Olivia's head in an almost maternal gesture. "Olivia, I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I want you to know I deeply regret my actions. Alan convinced me I was doing what was best for you, that you would be happier, married, and that he would take good care of the business." "How could you believe that?" asked Olivia, more curious than outraged. "Because I've also been manipulated by powerful men," admitted Marina, "and I projected onto you my own need for financial security." Dr. Hayes finally stood up, his posture defeated but still trying to maintain some dignity. "Olivia, I made mistakes, big mistakes, but I never wanted to hurt you. You don't understand the pressure I felt all these years, always being the less successful brother." "Uncle Alan," Olivia addressed him with surprising calm, "perhaps you really believed you were doing the right thing, but you manipulated my life, my feelings, and my parents' memory. That has consequences." Max approached Olivia and gently began nudging her toward the church exit. It was as if he was saying that this place had already served its purpose and it was time to leave to discover what truly mattered. "I think Max is right," said Olivia, smiling for the first time that day. "It's time to go home. Real home." The afternoon sun was already slanting toward the horizon when the small group left St. Mary's Church. Olivia walked beside Max, who guided her with the same determination as always, but now she fully understood the meaning of that silent leadership. Mrs. Cecilia, Claire, Ryan, and surprisingly, Caleb accompanied her back to the Hayes family mansion. Dr. Hayes had remained at the church with Marina, both aware that their presence at the mansion would be unwelcome at this moment. Olivia's uncle knew he would have to face the legal consequences of his actions, but first, he needed to process the magnitude of his defeat. "Olivia," Caleb broke the silence as they walked along the dirt road leading to the property. "You don't need to include me in this. I know you need time to process everything." She stopped and looked directly into his eyes. "Caleb, you were deceived too, and if there's one thing I learned today, it's that the truth, however painful, is always better than lies. I want you to be here when I discover what my parents really left for me." The Hayes family stables were even more imposing under the golden light of late afternoon. The hills extended as far as the eye could see, dotted with horses grazing peacefully. But it was toward the old stable, a half-abandoned stone structure at the back of the property, that Max guided the group. "I haven't been here in years," murmured Olivia, observing the structure that seemed to have been preserved by time. "Dad always said that one day this place would come back to life." Claire smiled nostalgically. Richard had grand plans for this place. He and Helen spent hours here imagining what it would be like when the center was operating. Mrs. Cecilia took an old key from her apron pocket. "Your parents gave me this. On the last day I saw them, they said I would know when to use it." The stable door opened with a creak that echoed off the stone walls. Inside, instead of the deteriorated structure they expected to find, they discovered a surprisingly well-preserved space. There were architectural drawings hanging on the walls, miniature models of rehabilitation equipment, and, in the center of the room, a large table covered with detailed plans. "My God," whispered Olivia, approaching the table. "They really planned all this." Ryan examined the documents with a technical eye. "These plans are incredible. A complete equine therapy center, with facilities for physical therapy, recreation areas, and even accommodations for families coming from far away." Max headed directly to a specific corner of the stable, where he began rhythmically tapping his hoof on the ground in an insistent manner. "He's trying to show us something," observed Caleb, approaching the horse. Claire knelt at the spot indicated by Max and discovered a stone slightly displaced from the others. When she removed it, she revealed a hidden compartment with a safe embedded in the wall. "Mom's diary," remembered Olivia, rushing to the house to retrieve it. 15 minutes. Later, she returned with a leather-bound diary, its pages yellowed by time but perfectly preserved. She quickly found the entry for her 10th birthday, 04-10-15, the day our girl became a young woman. May she always remember, life's best surprises come disguised as responsibility. "April 10th, 2015, murmured Olivia, typing the combination into the safe. 04-10-15. The safe opened with a soft click, revealing more than anyone could have imagined. There were organized folders with legal documents, photographs of children in therapy with horses, letters from doctors and physical therapists interested in the project, and a sealed envelope with Olivia's name written in Helen's handwriting. "A letter just for you," said Claire softly. Olivia opened the envelope with trembling hands and found a multi-page letter, along with a detailed map of the property and a golden key. "My dear daughter," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means you've found our true treasure. The Rehabilitation Center isn't just a project. It's our answer to the world, our way of transforming our wealth into something that truly matters." The letter continued explaining that Richard and Helen had secretly set aside a considerable portion of their fortune for the project, resources that were protected in a special account that only Olivia could access when she turned 25. The golden key opens a second safe, located in the century-old oak tree near the lake. There you'll find not only the financial resources, but also something much more valuable: letters from more than 50 families who have already registered to participate in the program when it launches. Caleb accompanied Olivia to the oak tree, indicated on the map, where there was indeed another secret compartment. The second safe contained bank statements, showing an impressive amount reserved exclusively for the center, along with piles of touching letters from desperate parents seeking alternative treatments for their children. "Olivia," said a familiar voice behind them. Everyone turned to see Father Augustus approaching, accompanied by Dr. Hayes, who seemed to have aged 10 years in just a few hours. "Father?" Olivia was surprised. "My child, I need to confess something. Your parents came to me before they left and asked me to be a kind of spiritual guardian for this project. I have here," he showed a folder, "the names of parish volunteers who offered to help when the center opened." Dr. Hayes approached hesitantly. "Olivia, I came to turn myself in to the authorities, but before that, I want to make a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" she asked cautiously. "Let me help build the center, not for forgiveness, I know I don't deserve it, but because it's the only way to honor my brother's memory. I can use my contacts in construction, my administrative experience. I want to transform my mistake into something positive." Olivia looked at Max, who remained calm by her side. Then she looked at the letters from the families, the detailed plans and the people who surrounded her with expectation. "Uncle Alan," she said finally, "you will have to answer for your actions before the law, but if you really want to help, you can start by returning all the resources you illegally diverted. I've already arranged that," he showed signed documents. "Ryan helped me prepare the transfers. All the money will be back in the original accounts by tomorrow." Caleb approached Olivia. "And what about us? Where do we stand after all this?" She smiled, gently touching his face. "I think we need to get to know each other for real, without lies or manipulation. If you want, you can help me build something real and meaningful." Max neighed softly as if approving the decision. The sun was setting completely on the horizon, but instead of darkness, it brought the promise of a new dawn. The Equine Rehabilitation Center of Richard and Helen Hayes' dreams would finally become a reality, and Olivia had discovered that her true inheritance wasn't land or money, but the opportunity to transform lives through love and dedication. 3 months had passed since the day that became known in St. Victoria Springs as the wedding that didn't happen. The story had spread through regional newspapers, but always with a positive focus. The young heiress who discovered her true calling and transformed a family tragedy into hope for dozens of children. The old Hayes family stable had become the nerve center of an impressive operation. Every morning, architects, engineers, therapists, and volunteers gathered to monitor the progress of construction on the most modern equine rehabilitation center in the region. Olivia arrived early that October morning, as had become her habit. Max faithfully accompanied her, now not only as a protector, but as a partner in a project that would give new meaning to their lives. The horse had revealed himself to be exceptionally talented for equine therapy, demonstrating extraordinary patience and intuition with the children who already visited the site. "Good morning, boss," greeted Ryan, approaching with a clipboard full of documents. In recent months, he had become Olivia's right-hand man in administering the project, definitively abandoning the family construction company to dedicate himself entirely to the center. "How are the registrations for the first class?" asked Olivia, watching the workers installing specialized equipment. "We have a waiting list," smiled Ryan. 62 families confirmed for the first 6 months of operation. Father Augustus managed to get the project approved by the Department of Health, so we'll have official support to also serve through public health care. Father Augustus had proven to be a fundamental ally, not only from a spiritual standpoint, but also administratively. His contacts with charitable institutions and government agencies greatly facilitated the approval and funding process for the center. Caleb appeared carrying architectural plans, his hair slightly disheveled and paint stains on his hands. In recent months, he had transformed. The impeccable executive had given way to a man genuinely passionate about building something meaningful. "The hydrotherapy pools turned out perfect," he announced, gently kissing Olivia's forehead. "And the solar heating system is working better than we expected." The relationship between them had blossomed in a completely new way. Free from external pressures and manipulations, they discovered they had much more in common than they imagined. Caleb had cancelled all questionable contracts. He maintained with Dr. Hayes and reoriented his construction company towards social projects. "Where's Claire?" asked Olivia, looking for the family's former accountant. "She arrived an hour ago," replied Ryan. "She's in the office with Marina, organizing the inauguration schedule." Marina Graham had become one of the project's most dedicated collaborators. Her experience in event organization proved invaluable for structuring the center's activities, and her genuine remorse motivated her to work tirelessly for the cause. "Olivia!" shouted an excited voice from across the grounds. It was Isabella, an 8-year-old girl with cerebral palsy, who had become the center's first official tester of equipment. She came twice a week for experimental sessions with Max, and the results were impressive. "Hi, Isabella. How was school today?" Olivia knelt to be at the girl's height. "Teacher said my coordination has improved a lot," replied Isabella, radiant. "Can I ride Max now?" "Of course, but first let's greet him properly." Max approached delicately, lowering his head to receive the girl's affection. In these moments, Olivia fully understood why her parents had dedicated so much time and resources to this project. Each smile, each small achievement by the children validated all the effort. Dr. Hayes appeared at the entrance to the grounds, carrying construction materials. In recent months, he had rigorously fulfilled his promise to repair the damage caused. All diverted resources were returned. He formally confessed his crimes to the authorities and negotiated an agreement that allowed him to perform community service instead of imprisonment. "Good morning," he greeted hesitantly. The relationship with Olivia was still tense, but she had decided to allow him to participate in building the center as a form of redemption. "Uncle Alan," Olivia responded cordially. "How is the progress on the recreation area?" "Almost finished. The adapted playground equipment arrived yesterday, and the landscaping team is finalizing the sensory gardens." It was strange to see the man who had almost destroyed her life working humbly to build something positive. But Olivia had learned that true strength came from forgiveness, not vengeance. Mrs. Cecilia approached, carrying a basket with snacks for all the workers. "My child," she said, observing the activity at the site, "your parents would be so proud." "Feel like they're here somehow," replied Olivia, looking at Max, who was patiently playing with Isabella. Claire emerged from the improvised office, carrying a stack of signed contracts. "Olivia, we did it," she announced, radiant. "The state, university approved the partnership for research in equine therapy. We'll have students of physical therapy, psychology, and veterinary medicine doing internships here. And the best part," added Marina, joining the group, "is that 3 other towns have already expressed interest in replicating the center's model." Olivia smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. It wasn't just the satisfaction of honoring her parents' memory, but the certainty that she was living her true calling. "You know what this means?" asked Caleb, embracing her waist. "That we're just beginning," she replied, watching Max, who seemed to perfectly understand the grandeur of the moment. The sun was setting once more over St. Victoria Springs, but this time it didn't bring the end of something. It brought the promise of a new chapter, not just for Olivia, but for all the families who would find hope and healing in that special place where love had triumphed over greed and where truth had proven more powerful than any lie. A year had passed since that memorable day at St. Mary's Church. St. Victoria Springs awoke that September morning with a festive air that seemed to embrace the entire town. But this time, the celebration wasn't just for one family. It was for an entire community that had united around a shared dream. The Helen and Richard Hayes Equine Rehabilitation Center was ready for its official inauguration. During the past 12 months, the site had transformed into a modern and welcoming complex, with facilities that surpassed any initial expectations. Therapeutic pools, adapted courts, modern stables, physical therapy rooms, and even a small auditorium for lectures and educational events. Olivia woke before dawn, as had become her habit. But this time it wasn't just to check if Max was in his place, it was to contemplate the view from her bedroom window, which now showed dozens of horses specially trained for equine therapy grazing peacefully in the fields her parents had dreamed of transforming. "Good morning, my love." Caleb appeared at the door, carrying a breakfast tray and a bouquet of wildflowers picked from the center's gardens. "Can you believe we've come this far?" she asked, accepting the steaming coffee. "A year ago I didn't even know who I really was," he replied, sitting beside her on the bed. "Today I know exactly where I want to be for the rest of my life." The relationship between them had evolved naturally and genuinely. Without external pressures, without rush, without games or manipulations. Just 2 adults discovering they shared the same values and dreams. Outside, the activity had already begun. Buses were arriving, bringing families from neighboring towns. Journalists were positioning themselves to cover the event, and government officials were confirming their presence to learn about the project that had become a national model. "Olivia!" shouted a familiar voice from the garden. It was Isabella, now 9 years old and visibly stronger and more confident. In recent months, she had become a kind of unofficial ambassador for the center, participating in promotional videos and telling her story to other children. "Max is waiting for me," announced the girl, radiant. Max had become much more than a pet horse. He was the heart of the equine therapy program, demonstrating an almost supernatural intuition for working with children with different needs. Veterinarians and specialists came from far away to study his natural technique. The inauguration ceremony was scheduled for 10 in the morning, but by 8 o'clock the place was already buzzing with activity. Claire coordinated the arrival of special guests, Marina supervised the decoration and logistical arrangements, and Ryan checked the final certification documents for the center. Dr. Hayes arrived early, as he had done every day for the past few months. His work of redemption was almost complete, but he had asked to continue as a permanent volunteer at the center. The experience had profoundly transformed him. "Olivia," he approached timidly, "may I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course, Uncle. I want you to know that these have been the best months of my life, not because I managed to redeem myself, but because I finally understood what my brother saw in you, the ability to transform pain into hope, to build bridges where others see chasms." Olivia smiled, affectionately touching her uncle's arm. Dad always said that the gravest mistakes can also generate the greatest lessons. You proved he was right. At exactly 10 o'clock, Father Augustus climbed onto the small, improvised stage at the center of the complex. Hundreds of people gathered in a semicircle, children in wheelchairs, emotional parents, specialized therapists, government authorities, and the entire community of St. Victoria Springs. Friends, the priest began, we are here not just to inaugurate a rehabilitation center, but to celebrate the victory of love over selfishness, of truth over lies, of unity over division. Olivia took the stage, accompanied by Max, who remained majestically by her side throughout the entire speech. "A year ago," she said, her voice filled with emotion but firm, "I thought I knew my story, my family, my destiny. Today I know the true story was just beginning. This center is not a monument to my parents, but a gift they left for all families who need hope." The crowd applauded warmly, but the most touching moment came when 15 children, who were already participating in the program, approached the stage, each holding a flower to give to Olivia. "Thank you for giving us Max," said Isabella, representing the group. "He taught us that we can be strong." After the official ceremony, when the guests spread throughout the complex to see the facilities, Caleb found Olivia in a moment of quietude in the main stable. "Olivia," he said, kneeling before her and removing a small box from his pocket. She laughed, covering her face with her hands. "Caleb, are you sure after everything we've been through?" "Precisely because of everything we've been through," he replied. "I know who you really are. I know who I am when I'm with you, and I know I want to build a family based on truth, not convenience." The ring was simple and elegant, but what really mattered was in his eyes, genuine love, mutual respect, and the certainty of a future built on solid foundations. "Yes," she answered, without hesitation. Max neighed softly as if approving the decision. And in that moment, Olivia understood that her true life had begun on the day when everything seemed to have ended. Her parents had not only left her a material legacy, but taught her that the best things in life come disguised as difficulties, that true love withstands any test, and that the courage to start again can transform not just one life, but hundreds of them. As the sun set over St. Victoria Springs, the Helen and Richard Hayes Center vibrated with children's laughter, hopeful conversations between parents, and the soft sound of hooves on earth, the soundtrack of dreams that had finally become reality. And Max, the guardian who had protected his owner through the storm, now grazed peacefully in the fields, knowing his mission had been successfully completed. The family was safe, the legacy preserved, and the future shone with infinite possibilities. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give